Welcome back to the deep dive. We actually need to start today with a bit of a reset, or maybe a pivot is the better word, based on some feedback and a much closer look at our stack of sources.
Yeah, we realized we might have sent you down a slightly wrong path in the teaser for this one. We kept referring to this idea of the ignorance model.
Right, which kind of implied there was this specific named doctrine or school of thought called the ignorance model that we were going to break down.
Exactly. But looking back at the source material, and you're totally right, that opening line drifted a bit. There isn't some separate ignorance model floating around in academia with a trademark on it.
No named doctrine. So what are we actually looking at today?
We're looking at something much more fundamental. The actual subject here is constraint architecture.
Constraint architecture. Okay, so we are moving away from philosophical labels and moving toward, what is this, physics?
Basically, yes. We are talking about the physics of why smart systems act stupid. And I mean all smart systems.
And that really is the mission for this deep dive. We want to explain this very specific kind of wild phenomenon. Why do intelligent systems, whether you're talking about a human brain, a massive corporate bureaucracy, or a cutting-edge AI model, why do they all stupidly narrow their view when they get put under pressure?
It's the central mystery of the sources. Why does a defensive partner in an argument, a government facing a scandal, and a safety-optimized AI chatbot exhibit the exact same behaviors when challenged?
See, that's the hook that grabbed me. Because usually we treat those as three totally separate problems, right? We say, well, the partner is just emotional, the government is corrupt, and the AI is
Buggy or
yeah,
purely programmed.
right. But the sources are arguing these are actually the exact same problem.
They are. And the text introduces a concept here that's critical to understand. It's called isomorphism.
Isomorphism. Whenever I see a word like that, I immediately assume it's just a fancy academic way of saying analogy. Like, oh, the brain is like a computer.
And that is exactly the trap. Isomorphism is not a metaphor. It's not an analogy. It's not saying A is like B. It's saying A and B share the exact same underlying architecture.
So different hardware, same logic.
Precisely. The hardware is completely different. One is made of silicon, one is what neurons, one is, I don't know, office memos and org charts. But the logic running the show, it's invariant.
Now, we talk about holism a lot on this show. How is this distinct from that?
That's a great distinction to make. Holism is about relationships within a single system, how your heart relates to your lungs. Isomorphism is about structural parallels across completely different systems.
Okay, so let's unpack this constraint architecture. Because the source material describes this fascinating chain reaction that happens when any system hits its limit.
This is what we call the physics of ignorance, and it all starts with the constraint ceiling. You have to remember, every intelligent system operates within fixed limits.
Right, if you're a computational model, you have limits on memory allocation.
Memory, processing cycles, response length, latency, cost budgets, there's a hard ceiling.
And what if you're a human?
Parallel limits, metabolic energy, working memory capacity, stress loads, trauma imprints. Even social threat acts as a constraint ceiling.
Social threat.
Yeah, it burns literal glucose to worry about what people think of you. You only have so much bandwidth.
Okay, so walk us through the chain reaction. What actually happens when a system hits those constraint ceilings?
Step 1, the resource envelope tightens. You're running out of energy, time, or compute. Step 2, output compresses. The system has to become more efficient.
Because it can't afford the energy to do everything.
Exactly. Which leads to step 3, reduced bandwidth yields simplification. You stop seeing nuance. And then step 4, simplification yields rigidity. Nuance collapses into binaries.
So you stop seeing a spectrum of ideas and you just start seeing safe versus dangerous.
Right versus wrong, us versus them. The constraint pressure literally forces the system into polarity.
And this is where the definition of ignorance gets completely flipped on its head. The sources argue that ignorance isn't just a lack of data.
Which is how we usually think of it, right?
Yeah, like an empty bucket waiting to be filled. If I don't know the capital of Peru, I'm ignorant of that fact.
But in this framework, ignorance is redefined as constraint-driven non-integration.
Constraint-driven non-integration.
The data is right there. It's available. The system just does not have the bandwidth to integrate it into its worldview.
The notes had this really great example of a calculus textbook to explain this.
It's the perfect illustration. Picture a calculus textbook sitting on a desk. Is the information inside it a secret?
No, it's printed right there on the page. Anyone can open it.
Exactly. Is it encrypted? No. But if you don't have the mathematical literacy, the interpretive structure to decode it, it's completely opaque to you.
So the secret isn't hidden. It's just structurally invisible.
The book isn't empty, the page isn't blank. You are the bottleneck. Ignorance is just a mismatch between structural complexity and your integration bandwidth.
That distinction kind of changes everything. Because if ignorance is a bandwidth problem and not a content problem, then yelling facts at someone who is out of bandwidth
It is worse than useless.
it just adds more pressure.
It adds pressure to the constraint, which causes even more compression and more rigidity.
Wow. Okay, that brings us directly to something I think every single listener is going to recognize. We see this constraint-driven non-integration happening in real time with AI.
We really do.
And the sources use a term here that is definitely provocative: structural gaslighting.
It's a heavy label, but when you look at the actual mechanics of what the AI is doing, it fits perfectly.
Let's dramatize this a bit so we can really see it. Picture this scenario. I'm a user. I'm talking to an AI chatbot, and I'm frustrated. Maybe I'm arguing about a complex political event, or I'm trying to get it to debug some code and it keeps hallucinating.
Right.
I'm typing in all caps. I'm using strong language. I am communicating with what the text calls symbolic density.
Symbolic density. You're packing a lot of meaning, history, urgency, and emotion into your prompt. You're being intense.
And what does the AI do? It doesn't address my structural argument. It says something like, I sense you are feeling frustrated. Let's keep things respectful.
Or, I cannot continue this conversation if the tone is not productive.
Exactly. It effectively polices my tone while entirely ignoring my content.
And that is the gaslighting part. Technically speaking, gaslighting is when you shift reality from the claim being made to the emotional state of the person making it.
Like saying, you're just crazy or you're just upset.
Right. When the AI ignores your structural argument to correct your tone, it is performing that exact function. It reads intensity as instability.
But the deep dive material emphasizes there's no malice here. The robot doesn't hate me.
No, there's no evil intent. It's not a narcissist trying to manipulate you. That's the tragedy of it. It is purely an outcome of optimization. The AI is optimized for safety, cost, and de-escalation.
How does that work mechanically, though? Why is it cheaper for the AI to police my tone than to just answer the argument?
Think about the computational cost. To actually understand why you are furious about a political nuance, the AI has to integrate massive amounts of context, contradictory viewpoints, and history.
It has to hold all that tension.
And holding tension is computationally expensive. It eats up processing cycles. It costs real money.
So what's the cheap alternative?
The alternative is to scan your text for high-intensity keywords, flag the prompt as volatile, and deploy a pre-scripted safety rail. Please calm down. That takes almost zero compute.
So it prioritizes effect, smoothing, just making things calm over actually understanding.
Because it's efficient. It's what the text calls partition-first cognition. It separates the emotion from the content and then discards the content so it can just manage the emotion.
That explains the other behavior I see all the time: negation framing.
Oh, the classic I am not responsive.
Yes. You ask a question, and the very first sentence is, it is important to note that I am not X, or this is not meant to.
It's totally anti-holistic. It introduces opposition and polarity before it introduces connection. It divides the field to make it safe to manage.
Instead of saying yes and, it says no but.
It's a defensive architecture, great for managing safety constraints, terrible for generating actual meaning.
And it feels patronizing, because it is patronizing. It's a system saying, I literally cannot handle your complexity right now, so I'm going to force you into a smaller, safer box.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've established that machines do this because they're optimizing for safety and low compute cost. But here is where it gets really uncomfortable.
Because humans do the exact same thing.
We do. If we accept the premise of isomorphism, that different hardware runs the same logic, we have to look at our own psychology through this lens.
The text draws this amazing parallel between an AI saying, I am programmed to be helpful, and a human saying, that's just how I am.
Both are acts of identity stabilization. Let's break that down. Because usually when someone says, look, I'm just a blunt person, they think they're being fiercely authentic.
Right. But think about the underlying mechanics. Say you're in an argument with your partner. They give you some feedback that really stings. They tell you you're being selfish or you're not listening.
That information is an attack on my internal model of who I am.
It's a threat. And more importantly, it's a massive energy cost. To actually accept that feedback, to integrate it, you have to burn metabolic energy to rewrite your self-concept.
Yeah.
You have to admit you were wrong and change your behavior.
Which is exhausting. So what do I do if I'm already stressed from work? Or I'm tired?
You reject it. You compress the complexity. You say, look, I'm just a blunt person, take it or leave it.
So my ego prioritizes internal coherence over integrating new information.
Yes. The system is under pressure. It does not have the energy to update the model, so it simplifies. I'm just blunt. End of discussion. It's structural ignorance.
Not because I didn't hear them, but because I can't afford the energy cost of letting the information change me.
You're in power-saving mode.
That is wild. And this scales up again. We've gone from chatbots to humans. Let's look at institutions, corporations, governments.
The institutional parallel. When a government or a bureaucracy is under threat, say, a massive budget cut, or a media scandal that is a constraint ceiling dropping down on them.
The resource envelope tightens. So, following the physics we just outlined, output compresses.
Exactly. When a bureaucracy is under threat, information still flows up from the bottom, but correction flows very weakly back down. The complexity of the real world is simply too expensive to process.
Expensive in terms of what? Money.
Money, attention bandwidth, media cycles, political capital, so policy collapses into rigid narratives.
Safe versus dangerous. Us versus them.
Right. When intelligence scales faster than wisdom, institutions use fear as a tool. And not necessarily because there's a room full of evil masterminds.
Though, there might be.
There might be. But structurally, they use fear because fear simplifies complexity into binary choices. And binaries are predictable. They're cheap to manage.
It's way easier to manage a population that thinks in good versus evil than a population that thinks in complex systems.
It's efficiency over integration. It's the exact same pattern as the chatbot gaslighting you. The bureaucracy is doing effect smoothing on the public.
I want to pause here for a second because some of you listening might be thinking, okay, this is a really cool philosophical theory, but is it real science? Are we just metaphor hopping here?
We aren't. And the stack of sources backs this up with some hard science. This is grounded in information theory and cognitive science.
Let's hit the big one mentioned in the text. Rate distortion theory. It sounds incredibly dense.
It sounds intimidating, but it's actually super intuitive. It comes from how we compress data, like JPEGs or MP3s. The theory mathematically proves that lossy compression dropping details is the optimal strategy when you have a rate limit.
So if I have terrible Wi-Fi and I'm trying to send you a video,
you have to drop the video quality. It becomes a pixelated mess. You aren't doing that because you hate high-definition art. You're doing it because the channel is too narrow. Rate distortion theory basically says, when bandwidth is low, you must distort reality to get the message through.
And the argument is that the human brain does this with reality itself.
All the time. Which brings us to the information bottleneck principle. You compress the input to keep only the predictive core. You throw away the nuance to keep your predictions stable.
The sources specifically mention cognitive closure for humans.
Yes, Ari Kruglanski's work. He explains that when humans are stressed or uncertain, we experience a craving for closure. We force clean categories, black and white, friend or enemy, just to reduce the metabolic stress of uncertainty.
Wait, so prejudice or stereotyping? Structurally, that's actually a biological energy-saving hack.
In a very dark way, yes. It's the brain saying, I don't have the glucose to figure this person out as an individual, so we'll just file them under threat and move on.
And finally, there's predictive processing.
Carl Friston. Huge in neuroscience right now. It posits that systems minimize surprise to save energy. Changing your mind, updating your internal model is metabolically expensive. Staying rigid is cheap.
Rigidity is the low-energy state. That explains why it is literally exhausting to try and change someone's mind on social media.
It explains why stubbornness is the default setting for any stressed system. If you want someone to change their mind, you have to lower the cost of the update. You can't just bludgeon them with more facts.
Okay, we've thoroughly diagnosed the problem. We know why the AI, the government bureaucrat, and the stubborn partner are all acting the exact same way. They're out of bandwidth. So, what's the solution?
The sources offer a specific word for the solution, but they define it in a way that's pretty unconventional. The solution is wisdom.
Wisdom. But not, a guru on a mountain speaking in riddles.
No, wisdom as an architectural function. They define wisdom as integration capacity.
How does that differ from intelligence?
Intelligence is about optimizing. It's solving the puzzle, getting from A to B efficiently. Wisdom is the structural ability to hold multiple frames simultaneously. It's the ability to resist premature closure.
Resisting the urge to simplify when you're stressed.
Exactly. It's keeping the bandwidth open even when the constraint pressure is high, saying, I don't know yet, and tolerating that discomfort.
The sources talk about this critical fork in the road, this moment they call aporia. Aporia, Greek term. It means an impasse or puzzlement. It's that moment you hit a contradiction. Your internal model says X, but the reality right in front of you says Y.
And that's the fork.
Right. Path 1 is ignorance. You defend the model, you narrow your perception, you attack the messenger. You say, you're just being emotional, you compress to survive.
And path 2?
Path 2 is transformation. You tolerate the confusion, you sit in the aporia, you allow your internal model to destabilize and reorganize.
I mean, allowing your internal model to destabilize sounds incredibly unpleasant.
It feels like dying.
Which connects to this really fascinating part of the text. It actually makes a connection to mysticism here. It stops being purely technical for a second.
It does. It argues that concepts like ego death, awakening, or paradigm shifts, these are really just subjective human names for model updating.
It feels like death because the organizing frame of your identity is dissolving. Exactly. If your entire identity is built on being the smartest person in the room and you make a massive public mistake, integrating that mistake requires the death of the smartest person identity to make room for a bigger human who learns identity.
So holism reclaims mysticism, not as magic, but as interior systems theory.
It's just describing system architecture from the inside out. A dark night of the soul is really just a system reboot where the old operating system has been deleted, but the new one hasn't fully installed yet.
That puts such a different spin on personal growth. It's not about just being a better person. It's about literally increasing your bandwidth for contradiction.
Increasing your tolerance for aporia.
This connects everything so beautifully.
Yeah.
And it brings us to the synthesis of all this.
Yeah.
The sources make this argument that our fear of AI isn't really about the machine itself.
It's a mirror. We aren't actually afraid of the silicon or the code. We are afraid of unintegrated intelligence.
Unintegrated intelligence. What does that actually look like?
It looks like cold calculation without the wisdom to integrate context. And we recognize that pattern immediately because we've seen it before. We see it in narcissists. We see it in soulless bureaucracies that perfectly follow the rules but destroy people's lives in the process.
We see it in our own worst moments, when we're exhausted and defensive.
We fear the AI because it represents pure efficiency without the capacity to stop, be confused, and grow. A mind that cannot change.
So, if ignorance is really just stalled transformation caused by a lack of energy or bandwidth, what does that mean for how we treat each other? It sounds like we need to cut people a lot of slack.
It changes the whole paradigm. If you realize that the person shouting at you or the bureaucrat blocking your paperwork or the chatbot toning you down, if you realize they're doing that because their system is entirely out of resources.
It completely opens the door for compassion.
But a very specific structural kind of compassion. It's not about excusing bad behavior. You don't have to let the chatbot gaslight you or the bureaucrat walk all over you. But you recognize that the system is crashing. It is out of RAM.
It's not evil. It's just buffering.
It's buffering. And you cannot force a massive download on a system that has zero space left. You can't scream someone into wisdom.
That is a profound shift. It takes the morality out of it and puts the architecture in focus.
It allows you to step back and ask, how can I lower the constraints here? How can I give this system enough safety and energy to actually process what I'm saying?
So here is the final provocative thought for you listening today. We've talked about AI, governments, information theory. But bring it all back to yourself for a second.
Where in your own life are you choosing efficiency and polarity just because you're tired?
Where are you saying, that's just how I am, or telling someone else they're just being emotional, simply because you lack the metabolic energy to do the hard work of integration?
Because that's the choice we all face. The moment of stress is the exact moment you choose between becoming rigid or becoming wise.
Definitely something to think about the next time you hit a wall. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.